Rockettes are the epitome of teamwork. Behind the scenes, people don't know, I call it battleship for dancers. Like the stage is this insane grid. From then on out, all your choreography is move right 2 spaces, move back 4, move left 3 spaces. And even though it's simple math, it's that fast.
This week, I'm honored to be joined by Laura Casselman, former Rockette, CEO of one of Inc. 5000's fastest growing companies, JVZoo, and now author of the Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Trust Your Increments. When you were making that jump from the dance world into the business world, but did you ever feel like you weren't identifying with yourself?
I finally arrived, like I'm in my executive position, and then I get asked for a sexual favor in exchange for my paycheck. In that moment, I was very brave and I stood up for myself, and I did this like movie scene of throwing water in the owner of the company's face. I went storming out of the restaurant in New York City. The bartender had walked around to hold the door open for me and high-fived me, and I felt super powerful. Then 3 minutes later, as I'm walking down the streets in New York City, I realized I'm unemployed. I'm instantly deflated. And I started back by going in and consulting. And I very much didn't feel in alignment with myself, but it was also truly when my career catapulted. It was like, no more of being treated like that. I will pave the way for myself. And I did. And I did it quickly too.
I want you to tell me about High Step in Country to start off. So what was that like in terms of solidifying your love for dance, which you developed at a really young age? I think you said it was at 3 years old, but what was it about High Step in Country or anything that you did at a young age with dance that really solidified this is the path that you wanted to go down?
Yeah, of course. So my first dance recital was at 3. And afterwards, I was taken to the local ice cream shop and got a banana split. And I was like, okay, like I get to be on the stage. When I'm done, people clap for me. And then I get to go have ice cream. Like, this is it. I'm totally doing this forever. Fast forward to I'm 16 years old and get hired for my first professional job, singing and dancing and high stepping country, which is Myrtle Beach's longest running country music show. And I loved it for so many reasons. One was someone was going to pay me to do what I loved. Like, yes, what I declared at 3 was going to happen. The choreographer was Mallory Graham, who I had idolized and followed around and danced for at national conventions. And would later go on to work with him outside of High Step and Country as well, where our choreography would win Emmys, and which was pretty cool. But then also just being the youngest in the cast, but being surrounded by other people who were in their 20s making this their profession at the time, but then being named their dance captain when I was a teenager, and these 20-year-olds had to follow me and like warming up and getting ready and whatnot. I just was like, this is it. I'm doing this forever.
So I have a unique experience. I live with a dancer, and he just finished up on Riverdance. So
Yeah.
I have so much respect for the dance world after seeing his experience and just hearing his story too. He has a very similar story. Like he started at 3 years old, went through all the dance troops and everything like that. I'm just so excited for today's conversation because just getting to talk about this. I love talking to him about it and talking to you about it. I know it's going to be equally as exciting.
I just want you to tell him that when I first moved to New York City as a dancer, that my first tour that I booked was a tour that was like showing how tap, clogging, and Irish step were so closely connected. And I was hired as a clogger, but someone got injured and I had to fill in an Irish step. Just humor him with that. I was so bad. Painful.
Well, we make him do it as like a party trick where it's like, it's the guy from Riverdance. And then he'll just look at us and he'll be like, oh my gosh, no. And then he gets arms to the side and he's just like, all right, here we go. It's so funny though. And your journey, like you get to New York, obviously you become a Rockette, but you started Ohio, South Carolina. And I'm sure for all the people that I'm friends with in New York, they probably haven't heard of it. And I had to do some reading about it. So this is what it told me on Wikipedia. 2010 statistics. Population, 726. Not 1,000, 726. Median household income, $25,313.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure there's a lot of people who think about, oh my gosh, Laura became a Rockette. She must have known somebody. She must have had some exuberant background that got her to that point. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would think that about a lot of people who get to a certain point in life. But you came from quite literally like a movie, small
Yeah.
town, one stoplight town, all the way to
Mhm.
New York City to achieve a dream. Can you talk about your parents in that situation? How influential were they to make sure that you didn't have this mindset that, oh, you're growing up in a small town, so you're going to stick in small town type of culture? They always promoted you to chase your dreams and make sure that
Mhm.
you were never going to be brought down by, if there was any environmental factors, you didn't feel them.
Yes. So I feel like I hit the lottery with parents. I always knew I was loved. I always knew I was supported. And I was always told that I could accomplish anything as long as I was willing to put in the work for it.
Hmm.
My mom sometimes regrets telling me that, not because of the things I've accomplished or tried to accomplish, but she says, like I didn't realize how unfair the world was.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that it's really truly not just about all the work that you put in, that it's about circumstances and if people like you or not, and if people think you're stupid or not. Being a blonde, bubbly female with a Southern accent, people underestimated me and my intelligence a lot as well.
Yeah.
But I think they gave me everything that I needed to be secure in myself so that I could handle rejection and be okay. So that I could face the ugliness of the world and still be okay because my roots were so deep and I was grounded. And that's just not my parents, but the small town of Clio, South Carolina is full of so many good, loving people. It really was a community effort. If someone's child, like if I was out and my parents were out of town, someone was always eyes on me. Even though I didn't know it,
Yeah.
they were just looking out for me.
Yeah.
So I just really developed this grounded sense of self worth
Yeah.
that I knew that the world could be ugly, but I would be okay.
I love hearing you say that about that community aspect, because I think a lot of people don't have that, unfortunately.
I agree.
And it's something that's so important in all aspects of our life, to have that community, to have that sense of a bond. And I think that's what's really special about the Rockettes in general. And I've heard you talk about it multiple times. Is it's like a sisterhood, right? Everybody
Mhm.
is there to promote each other. Nobody's out to gun for somebody else or to do X or do Y. Everybody's about helping each other out. And I wanted you to talk just a little bit about the cerebral and the physical aspect of being a Rockette, because it's so fascinating. There's so much that goes into it that nobody sees. I mean, the boot camp that you have to go through, how the stage is actually set up in like a grid system, the illusion that you have to create if everyone's a different height, how you have to kick at the same height so it looks the same. There's so many things that I can go into, but I want you to go into them instead. Talking about these aspects that go underappreciated, and maybe even how some of those aspects translate to later on in your story and how you can bring them over into business.
Absolutely. So I always thought the Rockettes were fascinating since I was 3 and saw them in a friend's mother's Good Housekeeping clip that she had taken out and put on her refrigerator. And it was like a Rockette leg workout. But I saw the pictures of the kick line and I was fascinated by the unison and the beauty of teamwork.
Yeah.
So when I announced, that I was going to become a Rockette and then went on to pursue my dance career and finally became a Rockette, I would always encounter people that were like, but why the Rockettes? Like, don't you want to be a star? And I'm like, starring the Rockettes. I am a star. Like I was just like, I don't understand. Like, it's so much harder to work as a team in unison to make something turn out perfect than it is as an individual. Because as an individual, you could say that's the way it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
But if a team is doing something and it's in unison and it's supposed to be exact, if one person is slightly off just by a fraction, it stands out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
So working as a team is less about ego and more about what's good for the team. And the Rockettes are the epitome of teamwork. Like it's just beauty at its finest. And yes, like you said, behind the scenes, people don't know. I call it battleship for dancers. Like the stage is this insane grid. Every aspect of the choreography is not exactly where every piece of your body is, including like where you're looking out of the corner of your eye, or if your eyes are straight on, or over your left cheekbone, over your right cheekbone. But at any point in time, your right foot and your left foot are both on grids on the stage, whether that's width or depth. You are exact at all moments. And it takes so much training and discipline and awareness. And then your number that you're given, this is my favorite. I was number 16. But your number that you're given in the line on the grid, from then on out, all your choreography is move right 2 spaces, move back 4, move left 3 spaces, up 2, over 1 right. And so you're doing math the whole time. And even though it's simple math, it's that fast. There's no, okay, 16 minus 4. It's just move and do the choreography exactly as you were just shown it while you're moving to all these exact marks. So we always joke to the Rockettes, like, can you imagine a Rockette that smoked pot before a show? It would never work.
It would never work.
Yeah, you gotta be tense. You gotta be stressed. You gotta be exact.
It's so fascinating. I've never talked to my roommate about how he prepped for Riverdance or if it was very similar. But I know that there are those aspects, and we're going to talk about it too when it comes to business. There's just so much that goes on in the back end that nobody wants to pay attention to, or nobody thinks to pay attention to, part because they don't even know to ask the right questions, but part because people just look at us on a surface level and they see what they want to see. And that's it. And then they make their own assumption. They judge the book by their cover and they come up with a definition for ourselves. And that was the aspect in your story of talking about what goes on in the actual dance world. But there's also this aspect of you that you have to build your skill sets outside of dance. And where I did talk to my roommate about a lot about was, so he was doing Riverdance over in Dubai. This was in 2021. While 2021, because we just graduated from college. So he was getting his master's degree online while he was dancing in Dubai. So he would be up in the middle of the night doing his master's program so he could work on his skill set in addition to doing dance. And I was like, you're insane. Like, who does that? And I was like, oh, Laura Casselman does that. Because you also worked on your skill sets, working in sales, working on being the best team leader that you could, in addition to doing dance at the same time. And I know you talk a lot about my generation in the book, and I think this is one of the biggest flaws of my generation, is that we are reluctant to put in the work now to reap the rewards later. And that delayed gratification. We focus on the short term, and we can say to ourselves, oh, I could be a Rockette now. But they don't think about, oh, what do I do when the Rockette ends? Or whatever their version of the Rockettes is. They don't think about what's the next step that I need to do. So can you talk about how Gen Z particularly can go about thinking about delayed gratification? We live in this social media age where everything's so now. But what does my generation need to do to take a step back and focus on the actions we take now and how it's going to affect our lives and maybe even our families' lives later on down the line?
Yeah, well, I'd first like to start by admitting a flaw of mine, especially when I first started writing this book, is that I underestimated how influenced your environment is.
Yeah.
So the instant gratification is because you've only ever been surrounded by it.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to think around that. But the best advice that I could give is to say instant gratification is fleeting, right? It's there and gone. And when you work for the instant gratification, it's the bad form of a cheap dopamine hit. Because I love a good cheap dopamine hit, and I will preach taking them as long as they motivate you to keep working towards your goals. Take them all day long. But bad cheap dopamine hits prevent you from accomplishing your goals. And no one wants to be in their 40s. I'm there now, right? But you don't want to be in your 40s starting over if you can prevent it. You want to have a more of a clear direction. Plenty of people start over in their 40s because they choose to, or they're forced to, and they create lemonade out of lemons. But as much as you can prepare yourself for, things will not always go your way. You won't always be given what you want. How can you go ahead and reach out to gain as much control as possible of when things go sideways? Prepare yourself for those things so you can have some control and develop skill sets that, while you may not want to utilize them daily now, that if you need to fall back on them, you can.
Yeah. And the skill sets you developed, sales being one of those things that
Mhm.
I hear all the time on the internet, that it's one of the most, if not the most important thing that you can develop, especially in the business world. And I don't think a lot of people my age understand that concept, that you don't have to go out and be a salesman, but you have to learn how to sell yourself and what package you bring to an employer. If you're going out to go be an
Mhm.
employee, or if you want to go out and you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to learn how to sell yourself as the CEO, as the one who's running the show. And I think a lot of people can't identify their own self-worth, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Where when it comes time to sell, okay, I'm Tom Cole, I'm the product today, I'm selling my services. If I were to ask you, like, what does JVZoo do? And I've heard you answer the question before, so I know you can. If I'm like, what does JVZoo do and how can they help people? You have that answer down to a T, and you can tell someone in one sentence or less. That doesn't make any
Mhm.
sense, but you can tell someone in one sentence.
One sentence.
When people get asked the same kind of question, they can't do that.
Mhm.
So, what advice would you have to somebody to help them come up with their elevator pitch, their one sentence that's going to, first of all, reinforce their own self confidence, their own self worth, and at the same time allow them to show the world the worth that they bring?
I think so many times when people think about their elevator pitch or they're positioning themselves as something that people want to, pay money for your skill set, that they feel icky and yuck about it.
Yeah,
But the reality is that your skill set is a sellable service. And you need to learn how to look at sales without the ick factor. My friend Dr. Cindy McGovern talks about this a lot. She's written 2 books on how to sell without that ick factor. But my favorite thing that she does is talk about the best salespeople in the world are children.
yeah,
And if you think about it that way, it's no longer icky. So when a child gets what they want, it's because they've sold the parent,
mm,
right? Or they sold the other person on giving them what they want. Now, yes, there's the form of tantrums, which is just like, in this tantrum, let me get out of this public situation and get my child to be quiet. But most often, it's simply that they've convinced you that what they want is okay and what they want you should provide. And, every time I watch my own toddler do this, I'm amazed, and there's no ick factor with it. So I think if you can remove the ick factor and look at sales as, hey, when you ask your waiter or your server to switch out a side item for something you prefer, as opposed to what came with it, and they say yes, you just sold them.
yeah,
And that's not icky. So it's the same way as presenting, this is what I can give you, my time and this skill set, in exchange for this paycheck. And this is why I'm providing you something you need, and you are in exchange providing me money, which I also need.
yeah.
And when you look at it through that lens, then it feels less icky, and people can start to formulate what it is that they do and why they should be able to sell themselves.
Yeah. I love that. And I think it applies in the same way to asking for help in the
Mm-hmm.
workplace too, where I
Mm-hmm.
think we think it's icky to go up to your boss and be like, hey, I'm sorry, I don't understand. I'm sorry, this isn't the resources that I need. I need different resources. Trying to step out of boundaries that maybe no one even told us that are put in place, but we put in place for ourselves. We're saying like, oh, okay, I'm the new analyst here at the company. Like, analysts don't go ask for more resources. Analysts don't raise their hands in meetings. Analysts don't speak up. Uh, it's something that I think a lot of young people put themselves into a box, and I think there is a lot of creativity out in the world that just gets boxed up
Mm-hmm.
because young people don't, like you just said, it's icky. It's icky to step outside the box, see what's out there outside of your comfort zone. When you were making that jump from the dance world into the business world, did you
Mm-hmm.
ever feel that sense of, I don't know if ickiness is the right word, but did you ever feel like you weren't identifying with yourself? I know you have a lot of skill sets that you were working on during that point of life that transferred over to the business world, but did you ever feel that the identity that you were going into now, you couldn't resonate the same way that you did with the identity of being a dancer, which was something that you were building upon from the time you were 3 years old?
Yes. So, in particular, when either I couldn't get my ego to get on board, ego is such a funny and tricky thing,
Yeah.
but or when things didn't play out the way I had planned for my career. I speak about it in the book, but also there's been times when, say, I planned something, I had finally arrived, like I'm in my executive position, and then I get asked for a sexual favor in exchange for my paycheck. And in that moment, I was very brave and I stood up for myself and I did this like movie scene of throwing water in the owner of the company's face. I went storming out of the restaurant in New York City. The bartender had walked around to hold the door open for me and high-fived me, and I felt super powerful. Then 3 minutes later, as I'm walking down the streets in New York City, I realize I'm unemployed. I realize it's my first executive position. I wasn't even there a year. I've now burned a bridge. Like, this is not someone I can list on my resume. And is it over? Right? I'm instantly deflated. And at that point in time, I remember thinking like, okay, this stinks. And I did. I backtracked and I started back by going in and consulting. I was no longer an employee. I was no longer an executive. I was consulting with companies. And it was both an emotional blow, but like a physical one to my resume.
Yeah.
And I very much didn't feel in alignment with myself. I felt like I just took this massive step back, and I kept trying to tell myself that quote where you like an arrow is being pulled backwards before it's propelled forward, and I wasn't buying it. I was like, this is ridiculous. But it was also truly when my career catapulted. It was truly when I was like, no more of being treated like that. I will pave the way for myself. And I did. And I did it quickly too.
We, in the social media age, have become so accustomed to dehumanizing people, to objectifying people. Some people make comments that are just incredibly degrading, incredibly rude. They don't really think twice about it because they're not humanizing the other person. And it's such an interesting thing to think about, because if we want to make this obsolete, I think this is one of the issues that we have to address. And in your tech background, I know you've talked about how you want to raise your daughter to be off of tech as much as possible, but it's in the future that we're going to have tech in more aspects of our life than we already do.
Sure.
So how do you prepare your daughter? I know she's 3, so it's not the type of conversation you have yet, but if you had to think about how you want to prepare your daughter to go through this world, navigating the social media age that we're in, and what steps do you think we can take to, if we need regulations, if we need just some change in the structure, so that we stop this objectification, we stop this degrading, and we get back to treating each other as human beings?
So, one of the biggest things that I do with my daughter now is that it is a rare occasion where I hand her a device, whether that's a phone or an iPad or a kid's Fire tablet, whatever. It's a rare occasion that she gets one of those to pass the time. But if you go to a restaurant and you look around and there are children there, almost every single one of them is playing a game. So my daughter has to do things that I had to do when I was a child, find ways to entertain herself. This also allows her the freedom to learn to be comfortable in her own presence. So many people don't know how to be alone. And when they are alone, they are scrolling social media, interacting with people, dehumanizing other people by their interactions online, and taking, again, those bad cheap shots of dopamine of where I just put that person in their place, or ha ha ha, and it's so wasteful of your time. And not just with how you could be productive with your time, but also in a way that takes you away from learning how to sit with yourself and your own thoughts and your own feelings. I love being alone. In fact, like now that I run companies, I really love my alone time. And even now, being a mother, alone time is a very rare thing, and I just cherish it. But also, I was forced as a child to learn to be alone, to entertain myself, whether that was reading a book or playing outside by myself, which is where a lot of my creativity comes from.
Yeah.
So my daughter, I'm doing those same things with her, but also when she says, she didn't understand for a long time when I was talking to someone on the phone why she couldn't see them, because her nanny at the time was FaceTiming all day and I didn't know that. Right. But that was what put me onto it. And then I started paying attention. And I was like, oh yeah, you can't be on FaceTime while you're with my daughter. um, but people have forgotten boundaries on all kinds of levels. Like if you go
Oh,
into a public restroom, there is inevitably someone on the telephone in the restroom.
yeah.
This is inappropriate, people. Not just for the people that are in there with you, but for you. Respect your own privacy.
Uh, yeah. The amount of times I see phones in the locker room and stuff like that,
Mhm.
it
It's
you know,
wild.
I do try to play devil's advocate for my generation a lot, but that's not one thing that's not a hill I'm willing to die on there, is our
No.
ability to integrate technology into every single aspect of our life. And
Yeah.
it is that alone time. So I recently just got back on a trip. I was in Canada, out in the
Mhm.
woods, no cell service, no nothing. It was probably my first time I- ever in my adult life where I had that. No,
Wow.
no texts from mom and dad. Well, checking in every now and then, of course.
Yeah.
And then still hear mom and dad. But no emails from work, nothing. And the serenity that you feel just being in the moment, embracing nature, embracing, what makes us human, which is being in the moment.
Hmm.
I was with a lot of friends that I love, just being together with people, really embracing what it means to be alive. To me,
Yeah.
I don't think technology makes us feel alive. I think it does a lot of great things, and we can go into that absolutely.
Mhm.
Talking about, I mean, it allowed us to connect. It allows people to connect all over the world. It allows commerce to conduct all over the world. It's increased, economic GDP. We can
Mhm.
go down all rabbit holes. But when it comes to being a human, like we talked about, in terms of degrading people, in terms of objectifying people, I think we think less of each other as humans, and we see each other more as just, I don't even know what the term to be is, like characters, like in our
True.
story and stuff like that, just characters we see online. Um, and I think when it translates into the workplace is when it comes time to conduct work by ourselves, or it comes time to think about, okay, I need to have a moment by myself to think about what I'm doing here, to think about what I want out of my career and stuff like that. We just can't do it because we're so stimulated all the time, and trying to think about forward thinking, it's not something that really comes to us anymore. We're so short sighted because that's the type of world that we live in now with short attention spans. We're not
Mhm.
ready to think about, okay, what do I need to do today to advance in my career? What do I need to do today to advance in my relationships? Being in the role that you are now, you have to be
Mhm.
constantly forward thinking, thinking about, okay, how can I grow my company? What can I do to make sure that employee satisfaction stays high? People don't want to leave, high retention, everything. There's so many avenues. That alone time that you have, I know you want to spend it with your family, you want to spend it with your daughter, but when you have alone time in the workplace, particularly, we'll get to the relationships towards the back end of the episode. But when you're thinking about the workplace, particularly, what's one piece of advice you can offer up to a young employee to think about, okay, here's where you are now in your career. Maybe it's not where you want to be. Maybe you're not making the absolute difference on the world and stuff like that. But if you think about it in this way, if you take the time to think about these thoughts, then you can climb and get to that place where you can make that significant impact.
Mhm. So I think there's two things that people need to consider. Do you need to feel like your work is fulfilling something for you? Right? Is it fulfilling a need to give back, a need to be relevant, a need to say I'm doing something meaningful?
Yeah.
And are you okay with your work being just something that possibly you have a good skill set with, but that work just pays you enough to then do the meaningful things in your life?
No.
Because that will determine a lot. For me, I actually love my jobs. I love what I do. I love the teams that I've built, and I'm super fortunate there. But
Yeah.
for me, my work doesn't have to make me feel like I'm doing something meaningful. I know I am because I allow people to care for their families by providing them work and a paycheck. I allow people to fulfill creative outlets by not pigeonholing them and actually encouraging them to take on outside projects and work that they don't have to only work for me as long as they prioritize working for me. You can be my full-time employee, still take side gigs. I don't care. I'm not going to pigeonhole you into that.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think it makes you a better, more well-rounded employee for me. But me personally, as long as I'm making the money to then go do the things that make me happy, to do the things that make me feel like my life has meaning, to care for the people that I love, to donate money to causes that matter to me, I'm good.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't know what matters in that respect. And if you just start there, then it will help you clarify the decisions that you make in your career along the way.
Yeah. I know you know Ken Rusk, and we had a great conversation talking about visualizing what is that end goal, what is that destination.
Mm-hmm.
And once you can work backwards,
Mm-hmm.
it gets a heck of a lot easier. And I love the point you talked on there too, where money's not something to demonize people. Like I talk about this a lot. Like money, we all need it, and you need it to do incredible things. If you want to help people, one of the best ways that you can help people is having a lot of money, and you can make a difference in people's lives. So thinking about, okay, here's my end goal. If I want to donate a new school, you need money to do that and stuff like that. Now I'm sure there's a large group of people that I have the privilege of being able to interview that want me to just ask you, like, how do you make money? How do you do this? What's the secret to being CEO? I'm not going to do that today because that's not why we're here. And I'm sure some people want to ask, if they know their own version of Laura Casselman in their own life, how can they ask them? And they ask the wrong way. They just go up to them and just be like, oh, how can I make money? And you're just like, oh my God, another one of these people. Like, come on. That's not how you do it. So what's your tip for someone in their 20s right now who's in the role? Maybe they don't want to be in the role. Maybe they want to take that next step and they have a mentor in their life. How can they go about not asking a mentor for, oh, how do you make money? But how do you go about unlocking their knowledge and getting something out of them and showing them that you're engaged with them as a person? You're not just asking them a question because, you're young and naive and you just want to go ahead and ask something like that.
So I think there's a couple ways, right? But one of those things is by, number one, asking thoughtful questions. How do you ask thoughtful questions? You gain knowledge. So you do all your research that you can do on your own. You're the technology generation. So you've got your phones, you've got your computers. Go do your research and then have thoughtful questions to ask your mentor or that person. Don't just say, how do you make money? Yeah. How can I monetize X while doing Y and spending Z? Right? You already know it's going to cost you this to do that, but you've got to figure out how to monetize that. Or how do I increase my profits when I'm, already feel like they're just chiseled away as it is, and I don't have any more money to spend to bring money in? Ask thoughtful questions and give specific examples, not just how do I make money? How do you make money? You exchange a service or your time for the money. That's pretty simple. You've got to get really detailed with your questions. Yeah. And you need to put in the time that the rest of us who are trying to help you say, oh, this is worth my time. This person deserves my free time for this. Because even I am at a place in my career where I have to ask thoughtful questions to the people that have surpassed me, and that I want to get to where they are, but I can't just say, hey, how did you get there? That's not a thoughtful question. It's not worth their time, and I don't deserve the answer. Be worthy of the answer by doing your own basic research first. But also, I would say that when you're talking about making money, you have to understand that your skills and your time are worth money. Yeah. They are. But how much money they're worth depends on the quality of your work. Now, there's plenty of jobs that you can do that don't need quality, but those are lower paying jobs where you are basically paid to be a human being in a building while people are coming and going from it. Don't get mad if it's minimum wage for doing a lower quality job. You want to make more money, you have to have better quality to provide them. And there's so many things. Ken is a great example, Ken Rusk, of like, the job doesn't have to be glamorous to make money. It doesn't. People are always like, that's beneath me. I'm a CEO of a tech company and nothing's beneath me. I take out the trash. I have cleaned the bathrooms in our office. There's nothing. I have chased a rooster out of our parking lot. What? Right? Like, you can't even make this stuff up. But I needed my team to be doing the jobs I'm paying them. I'll take care of the rooster.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. On a busy 4-lane highway, too. Here's a rooster in my parking lot. But, like, I think like a lot of times people are like, oh, that job is beneath me and it doesn't pay enough. Then develop the skill set that does pay enough.
Yeah.
There are plenty of people that have started with the lowest paying jobs that are now running the place.
Yeah. My generation doesn't believe in climbing the corporate ladder anymore. They don't believe in putting in the work. And I don't know if I necessarily agree or disagree with that approach, because there's, a lot of schools of thought and there's a lot of research to show that if you hop to another job, you can increase your salary by X
Mhm.
amount, you can increase your
Yeah.
skill sets. There's a large amount of evidence to support that. But I do think
Mhm.
there's a large amount of evidence to support that Gen Z is entitled, where they
Mhm.
don't want to go through building their way up. And even if it doesn't mean climbing the same ladder, maybe you have to hop rungs on ladders to get to the top.
Yeah.
But even when you're at the top, like you just talked about, yes, it keeps you humble, it shows humility, but it also shows that you're invested in the people, you're invested in what you're doing. There's
Mhm.
plenty of leaders out there who aren't leaders, they're bosses. And
Gosh,
they
yes.
just go through their life and they're focused on, okay, what do I need to do to hit my quota today? What do I need to do to get my bonus this year? They're not focused on their employee. They could care less if employee number 627 has a doctor's appointment, or if their child's sick. If
Mhm.
it means that the company is going to falter, then they'll do what they need to do to make sure the company succeeds. Um, Being a leader is a really unique aspect. It really warms my heart to hear that you're out there chasing roosters, as ridiculous as it sounds. But
Mhm.
when it comes to being a leader, we talked about being in a team aspect with the Rockettes. It doesn't sound like
Mhm.
maybe there was a leader, but it sounds like it's very team
Yeah.
oriented, just in terms of like, one for all for one.
We have leaders. I still hear her voice in my
Yeah.
head at night in my dreams or nightmares, whichever they are.
but I love that. But just because you hear her voice, like, the leader's not someone to be afraid of. Like, it's someone who inspires you. It's someone
Mhm.
who should want you to get up in the morning, go to work and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
I encourage you, if your boss isn't that type of person, you have the flexibility to go find another person like that. Go find them. It's just as important
agree.
what job you do as who you work for, to build that kind of camaraderie and everything like that.
One
Uh,
little note about
yeah.
climbing the ladder, and like your generation doesn't necessarily see the benefit in that.
Yeah.
There's incredible things that you can learn. Say you want to run companies one day. Well, you have to learn how to actually run a company or you will lose your company. I've shared so many stats about how many small businesses fell a year. And I shared that like 95% of small businesses fell every single year.
Yeah.
So you need the skill sets to make your business succeed. And a lot of the things you have to learn aren't fun, aren't glamorous. It's like when you were in school and you went to classes that you never understood why you were there. Later in life, you realize what you learned in that class. Unfortunately, the teacher didn't make it relevant to you at the time and didn't tell you how you were going to use that information later in life.
Yeah.
But in climbing the corporate ladder, you get to learn not only how to make the things you want to succeed, but you learn how you will not lead and how to fail
Yeah.
by other people's mistakes. And I say this because the way I learned to lead wasn't by only seeing people that inspired me and made me think, gosh, that's good. And gosh, I want to be more like them. But more than that, I saw managers and executives that I knew I never wanted to be like.
Yeah.
And a little bit of karma that feels good is that those people that were my worst managers, those people that I just couldn't stand, that I was building their bonuses. I was the one doing it and the people around me were the ones doing it for them.
Yeah.
Well, they're still in that same middle management position that I blew past
Yeah.
in the same exact company. So karma will serve its purpose and it will do its thing. And those people will later reach out to you and ask for a job. It happens. And then you just don't have room on your team.
Yeah.
I just don't have room on my team for the people that taught me some of my most valuable lessons, but did so by demonstrating how I did not want to be.
I'm gonna clip that, Laura. That's a really good line.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful to look at their LinkedIn and see that nothing's changed in 17 years.
Yeah. I love that. I do love that. And there's two real things. First of all, if you want to be an entrepreneur, I can't think of a better way to learn how to be an entrepreneur than, first of all, getting paid. And second of all, you get to go into a business that you like doing and you get to learn from the ground up of how that business is constructed. And that's called getting
Mhm,
an entry level job. So I encourage anyone who's going to graduate school or has just graduated school, find that thing if you know what it is. I know a lot of people don't, but if you know what that is, go in at the ground floor, see how it was built from the ground up, and then go leave and do your own thing. And the second thing is, if you don't like the system that's in place, go build your own. And that's a beautiful thing that we all have the power to do.
mhm,
And I want to tie that point to another elephant in the room that you address in the book, which is so important. It's for all the ladies who are listening. And it's when you get to the point in your career where I'm sure there's some women in their 20s right now who are listening, maybe even older, that are thinking about becoming a mother or if they want to stick in their career and the impact that that's going to have on potential earnings. Because the data shows it's evident that the
mhm.
second you go to become a mother, the earning potential drastically decreases. 1 in 4 women are back to work 2 weeks after giving birth. That was a statistic from 2015, so I'm not sure how outdated that is. 23% of women in the private sector have paid maternity leave. That's it, 23%. That's crazy. That shouldn't be the case. And when it comes to changing the system, going out and starting a business, being a high earner, being the breadwinner for the family, badass. Being a mother, badass. You shouldn't have to choose one or the other. So what advice would you give, especially to the ladies today? The system right now is kind of forcing them to choose one or the other.
Mhm.
Can you give any advice from your own personal story about how you can go about navigating that challenge?
I wish I had a clear-cut answer and
Hmm.
directions to give. I really do, but this is an ongoing issue.
Yeah.
As a business leader, I remember the first time, I mean, I'm in a very male dominant industry. So celebrating having like a 50-50 male to female ratio in my companies was huge. But then when for the first time I had to address someone taking maternity leave, it was hard
Yeah.
as a business leader, right? As a human being, easy. As a business leader, how do I pay this person their salary, give them the time off that they need, bring someone else in, train them, fill their spot, and pay them
Yeah.
and not be able to risk losing something in the company. That from a business aspect is hard. From an individual aspect, I waited until I was 40 to start a family, 41 when I gave birth,
Yeah.
because I was established in my career and I knew it couldn't be taken away. Yet I took 2 days and a weekend off to give birth. Complicated, um, did not go smoothly, had lots of long term issues afterwards, and was still working every day. And I can say, don't do what I did,
Yeah.
except so many women don't have the choice. I did have the choice, yet I still mentally had the block that if I step away, they're going to try to take my position from me. If I'm out of the game, they're going to say I got weak, I got soft, I fell behind.
Yeah.
And that's a direct result of being in male dominant industries.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, there's only one way we're going to change it, and that is to do your research. Don't just listen to what media tells you, but do your research and vote accordingly, because we need policy change in this country, for all women to have paid maternity leave and to be able to come back to their jobs and be paid for those jobs. And for that to happen, small businesses, which make up an overwhelming percentage of employment in this country, need to have tax breaks in order to do that.
Yeah.
So we have to vote for the people that are going to give us this policy change.
Yeah. And
It's
again,
hard, it's complicated. I wish it was clear cut. I wish I was like, I know the answer.
yeah. And I didn't do too much reading into everything that's going on, but it's definitely something that was eye opening as I
Mhm.
dug into it. It's something I don't think about in my daily life. I'm 24. I'm not in a relationship. I'm not thinking about potentially starting a family or anything like that, what the implications would be. But I definitely
Mm-hmm.
do have, I mean, my own mom. I have a bunch of females in my life. I have a bunch of family members that just became mothers. And I
Mm-hmm.
can only think about these are the decisions that they just had to go through, and to think that it's even a question. And then, comparing it to how maternity leave works in other parts of the world, it's just crazy that we're not
Wild.
celebrating motherhood, which is, to me, I don't think there's anything better in this world. Your mother raises you to be an amazing human being, and we're not championing mothers to be the best versions of themselves that they can be. And I know that people are delaying becoming mothers, um, and it's not something a lot of people in their 20s think about as normally as they
Mm-hmm.
used to, as becoming a mother at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is one of the leading reasons why, is because it's incredibly difficult to even think about starting a family at this point in your career, where you can hit a serious point of, you can see your earnings go this way if you don't become a mother, and you can see them going this way if you do. Crazy to me.
It's
I fully
wild.
agree with you.
And
Yeah.
especially when it takes two incomes generally to
Yeah.
pay bills.
Yeah.
Um, you
That's
know,
one of the biggest things I keep seeing, is that I'm sorry to cut you off there, but
no, go.
that we don't live in a system that promotes one income. The system
Yeah.
we live in right now, you can only survive. In some places, it's becoming increasingly difficult with the raising cost of living, with inflation, to survive on two incomes. It's absurd.
It's absurd. And I think too, like, we have to remember that working moms, man, they are burning the candle in so many ways. Like, it's not even at both ends. Like, there's flames coming from the side too. I don't,
Yeah.
and like, I am in a privileged position to say this. So I know if I experience it with the income that I have, with the support system of family and friends that I have, I cannot imagine what women without my income, without my means, and without my support system do. I
Yeah.
cannot. And we devalue women who have taken time off from work to raise their children or just for maternity leave, when the reality is, if you want something done and you need it done quickly, ask a mom.
Yeah.
Ask a mom. She will get it done. She may look frazzled doing it. She may still be in her sweats with her messy bun, but it will be done the exact way you wanted it.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about my mom knows the answer to everything. She knows how to research everything. She knows how to get every single thing done. My mom's amazing.
Yeah,
Um, what have you
I
what have
love
you
it.
taken away from your own mom? I know you're into your motherhood journey now. Your daughter is 3. Is that correct?
Yes, just
Yeah.
turned 3.
What aspects of the way your mother raised you are you trying to pass down now to your daughter?
Yeah, so my mom, she's an interesting lady and was the perfect mom for me. Um, my mom was an English and grammar teacher who thought like diagramming sentences that took poster boards to do was fun. And so our summer vacations, my sister and I, we always had extra homework and things that we had to do over the summer because they were fun. Um, but um, my mom really did instill self-worth, like a sense of self-worth in us, letting us know what we were capable of. And there was nothing that we weren't capable of doing. She raised very independent children. She was deliberate about it. Um, in the second grade, I started washing my own clothes, and I had housework that was mandatory that I had to do. By the time I was in the third grade, I was cooking 2 nights out of the week. So when I moved out when I was 16, it was nothing. I knew how to handle the things I needed to handle.
Yeah.
I could live on my own, take care of myself. Those things were great. But my mom just had some pretty profound moments in my life. I remember when I was 16 and living on my own, that my mom came to visit, and I asked her some question that seemed very hard to me at the time. And I don't remember the question, but I do remember her answer. And it was that, I've raised you for 16 years. If you
Mhm.
don't know the answer to this now, you never will. It
Yeah.
was very much like, you have everything you need to figure out how to form this answer, to get the information and to make a judgment call on your own.
Yeah.
So she knew what she had given me. And I think, like, even my daughter now being able to be around my parents, it's good both ways. It's good for them. It keeps them young, but it's good for my daughter because, like, she sees these great people that
Yeah.
loved me and supported me and love her and support her. And there is something to be said about having someone in your life that gives you unconditional love.
Oh, absolutely. And that warms my heart because my parents are the same way. And
Yeah.
my dad always jokes about, his biggest compliment for me is he always tells me he can throw me out in the street tomorrow and he knows I'd be fine because we've developed like that sense of independence in myself where, like you just said, like if there's an obstacle, if there's a question, like they've taught me. It's the biggest gift they've ever given me. And I look
Yeah.
up to my parents as such an inspiration. And I know I just talked about your mom, but I want to highlight, the other people in your life too. Your dad, owned a roofing construction company. You always talked about how you learned from him
Hmm.
that way. Your
Hmm.
grandpa, he was World War II veteran. I was reading.
Yes.
Married
Yes.
to your, he's passed away, but at the
Yes.
time of his death, married to your grandma for 64 years.
Yes.
That's an inspiration to me, just because that's something
And my
a lot of.
grandmother is 101 now.
Oh my goodness! Congratulations. That's
I
crazy.
know. Man, she's a force. She is so incredible. She's so incredible.
Oh,
I
that's
am
so
so
beautiful.
fortunate with my family, I will say. Like
Yeah.
I'm super
And
fortunate with the family I
family's
have.
everything. Family's my grandpa, he's turning 85 tomorrow, actually. And
Happy
just having
birthday.
thank you. That familial connection is everything. And what I wanted to tie this to is, I've heard you talk about like if you don't feel inspired by the people in the room with you, I gotta switch rooms. And I always feel inspired by my family. But I think a
Mhm.
lot of people look at inspiration as someone who's older or wiser than them. But I also think, you're in a unique position now as as a mother yourself, where you can find inspiration from your daughter. And I was just curious to hear you talk about how do you get inspired by your daughter on a daily basis?
Oh my gosh, like having a kid around you, it's really interesting because you're responsible for teaching them so much, but then you get retaught things that you knew but somehow forgot. And it's something that we all need to constantly be reminded of is failure is only failure if you let it be the end of the sentence. My
Nice.
daughter, every child learning to do something is proof of that. We fail until we don't fail. We keep trying over and over again, and kids don't get discouraged. They just keep
Yeah,
on.
they
Like
just keep
it's
going.
just like, oh, that happened. Let's do it again. All adults can be consistently reminded of that, and it will benefit us all if we just look at that and stop being embarrassed. Adults, we get into these little boxes and then we're embarrassed to try something new, um, because we're like, we won't be good at that the first time. Well, no kidding. No
Mhm.
one is good at something the first time. You have to keep trying at things. um, and even showing my nephew, like we went to play top golf and my nephew didn't want to play because he wasn't good. And I'm like,
You
I
gotta
love
work
this
at it.
game and I'm awful. Like top golf is so much fun to me and I will always be the loser.
Yeah.
And it's great. You know what I mean? Like because I'm there and I'm having fun and it's about the people that I'm with and what takes place outside of the game.
It's about the important things. I agree.
Hmm.
Your nephew should see my golf swing. So I stink, and I line up at a 45-degree angle if I want to hit the ball straight. Um, so
Cool.
yeah, yeah, it's my unique like
You
Happy
guys want
Gilmore
to see
type of
something
swing.
cool? Yeah.
Uh,
Um, yeah, and if you weren't fortunate enough to be born into a family that you love and admire and that inspires you, then go build your own family. Like, and I'm not even
yeah,
talking about having children. I'm just saying the people that you
go find
surround
them.
yourself
Yeah,
with, the people that you choose to make your family in life, make
yeah.
smart choices.
Not all families bonded by blood. That's for sure.
No,
And
definitely not.
it's one of those things that I increasingly never take for granted anymore is the love that my family has and my extended family too. I have a massive extended family,
Me
and we're
too.
all very close, and it is such a blessing. It really is. Laura, this
Yeah.
was such a pleasure. I can't believe the hours flown by already. I want to ask you the show staple question, and it really ties into what we're talking about right now with family and just the love going
Mhm.
around. And the question is, after everything that you've been through so far, what have you learned about love?
Oh, that is probably the most important thing, right? The
Yeah,
relationships that we create, the ones that we build and nurture. I think that that's got to be the only true thing that matters at the end of it all.